Noswaith dda pawb, good evening a chroeso i'r Theatr Nick Whitehead. Very warm welcome to the Nick Whitehead Theatre ar gyfer ein dalaeth cyhoeddus ni ar dydd Mercher y 4 o Chwefror, so croeso. So warm welcome this evening to everyone in the Nick Whitehead Theatre on our third public lecture this series for the year, and it's on the 4th of February here. So fy enw fi yw Olivia Neen ac rwyf yn diwtor sgiliau iaith ac academaeth Cymraeg yma yn y Brifysgol. Mae'n fraint cyflwyno'r dalaeth cyhoeddus hon, gan fy mod yn ddigon ffodus i gynnig darpariaeth Cymraeg i garfannau gwaith cymdeithasol. So, my name is Olivia Neen, and I'm a Welsh language skills tutor and academic skills tutor here at Wrexham University, and it is a huge privilege to be introducing this lecture, as I am fortunate enough to provide Welsh language provision within the university for social care cohorts and allied health cohorts, and of course our great policing cohorts with Teresa Davis as well. Fel Prifysgol, rydym yn falch o gefnogi myfyrwyr plis mona, gwaith cymdeithasol ac iechyd perthynol gan fod y proffesiynau hyn yn allweddol i les ein cymunedau. So, as a university, we're very proud to support professions such as allied health, social care and policing that are vital to the well-being of our communities. Trwy cynnig cyfleoedd i ddysgu trwy'r Cymraeg, rydym yn meithrin gweithle hyderus sy'n ddarparu gwasanaethau sensitif ac o safon i bobl ledled Cymru. So, as we're providing our Welsh language teaching here at Wrexham University, we are nurturing a confident workforce that can deliver sensitive, high-quality services across Wales. Dwi'n edrych ymlaen yn fawr ar y tudalaeth heno, ac ar y diwedd bydd yn hapus i gynnig cefnogaeth Cymraeg i unrhyw un sy'n ofyn cwestiwn yn yr iaith. So, I'm very much looking forward to the lecture this evening, and I'm here to offer any sort of Welsh language translation support this evening with any questions at the end of the lecture. Gyda hynny, mae'n bleser nawr trosglwyddo ymlaen at Dr Caroline Hughes, deian cyswllt ar gyfer ymgysylltiad myfyrwyr yn y gyfadran gwyddorau cymdeithasol a bywyd. So with that, it's a very great pleasure to introduce the Associate Dean for Student Engagement in the Faculty of Social Life Sciences, Dr Caroline Hughes. Diolch, Caroline.
Diolch, Olivia. Noswaith dda pawb, a chroeso cynnes iawn i Theatr Nick Whitehead ac i'r Brifysgol Wrexham. Trydydd yn eich cyfres darlithoedd ymchwil. Mae gen ti ffrind yno fi, goruchwyliaeth adlewyrchol cyfoedion i gyfeiriad mewn heddlu. Good evening everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Nick Whitehead Theatre and to Wrexham University. The third in our research lecture series this year. You've got a friend in me, peer-to-peer reflective supervision in policing. Mae'n bleser gweld cynulleidfa mor ymrywiol gyda ni, heno. Aelodau'r cyhoedd partneriaid strategol, cydweithwyr ffrindiau ac wrth gwrs ein myfyrwyr. It's wonderful to see such a diverse audience gathered here tonight. Members of the public, strategic partners, colleagues, friends, and our students. As Olivia says, my name is Dr Caroline Hughes, Associate Dean for Student Engagement in the Faculty of Social and Life Sciences. Our faculty prides itself on a strong research culture woven directly into our teaching. Our close partnerships with organisations across North Wales, including those represented here this evening, ensure that our students learn in ways firmly connected to real practice and real communities. Just a note on the housekeeping, we're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so in the event of an alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit, and members of the research office will escort everyone to the assembly point 8 in the car park. It's an enormous pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. I've known Tegan for many years, first as her lecturer on the BA Criminology and Criminal Justice, then as her PhD supervisor, and now as a valued colleague, working closely together towards a trauma-informed university and nation, and within the Centre for People's Justice. Watching her develop from a thoughtful and curious student into the compassionate, creative and socially engaged researcher she is today has been a true privilege of my career. Tegan embodies the values of Wrexham University. She's community-focused, inclusive and deeply committed to improving the lives of others through research grounded in the realities of North Wales and beyond. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the wider research team, Nick Hoose, Andy Crawford and Dr Sarah Dubberley, whose combined expertise across policing, criminal justice and social work gives this research project its rich, multidisciplinary perspective and embodies our collaborative approach to learning and teaching and research. Integral to the research team's approach has been reflective practice, which has enabled them to carry out this sensitive work. This research was supported by ACE Hub Wales and carried out in partnership with North Wales Police, whose work in safeguarding our communities and responding to complex situations is so important. Understanding the pressures and emotional realities of that work is vital, and studies like this support evidence-informed approaches to well-being and professional practice. Tonight's lecture invites us to reflect on these themes and to consider how we better support those who carry significant responsibilities on behalf of the public. Hoffwn groesawu Dr Tegan Brierley-Sollis. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr Tegan Brierley-Sollis. Please join me in giving her a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I just want to say I am so grateful to see so many of you in the audience this evening. And I do hope that you enjoy the lecture and you leave with lots of questions. I think that's a really good sign of good research. So we've named the talk tonight, You've Got a Friend in Me. And you may or may not recognise that from a famous song from Toy Story. But we have chosen the name You've Got a Friend in Me because this research has been all about connection, all about working together and recognising that we are all human and we all feel emotion, and actually reaching out to one another can make a huge difference. So my name is Dr Tegan Brierley-Sollis. I'm a senior lecturer here in policing, criminology and trauma-informed approaches, and part of the research team that has led this piece of research. So first, I would just like to say a huge thank you to our participants who took part in this research. This is one of the most important acknowledgements that I'll make tonight, because without individuals that take part willingly in research and share their stories with us and really engage, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do. And we know that it takes time and we know that it takes energy. And I think the greatest gift that we can give one another is each other's time and is each other's energy. And I just want to say again, thank you so much to those who participated in this research. And thank you to those who will continue to participate in research and really help us to develop new ideas, new initiatives, and explore different measures that we might not have explored before. Okay, so I'm holding a glass of water in front of me. How heavy do you think this glass of water is?
400 grams.
400 grams. Well, perhaps that is actually the wrong question. Maybe the question should be, how heavy will this be based on how long I'm holding it? So if I'm holding it for a minute, it'll be fine. Maybe if I'm holding it for half an hour, I might start to feel the pressure. But if I'm holding it all day, holding that in all day, then my arm is going to start to really ache, and I'm going to start feeling the effects of that very quickly. And the same can be said for when we hold in emotion and when we hold in experiences of indirect trauma. So tonight I'm going to give context to our research with police officers and staff. I will probably use staff and officers interchangeably this evening, but the research did involve both officers and staff. discuss the concept of indirect trauma, so what is indirect trauma and how can it manifest, and share our findings and our research process as well. So as Caroline mentioned, our research has been kindly funded, so another 2 thank yous go to the Learned Society of Wales, who funded our initial workshops, and to ACE Hub Wales, who funded the entire project. Thank you also to Cyfiawnder for funding our presentations at conferences where we've been able to share some of this work. And as Caroline mentioned, our research team also includes Nick Hoos, who will give a wave, Dr. Sarah Dudley, who will give a wave, and Andy Crawford, who will give a wave. And if you've got any hard questions, ask them, not me. So what do we know about wellbeing in the police? So this was part of our research. We wanted to conduct a review of the literature to find out what we already knew about wellbeing. And what studies tell us is that one in 5 police officers will experience PTSD, and often they won't know how poorly they are until it gets to quite late down the line. We also know that from research done in 2007 and 2016, that there's a culture that exists in policing which restricts the expression of emotion, and that's including acknowledgement that actually it's very emotionally demanding work, but there's still this underlying culture where there's a bit of a restriction of emotion. Disassociation may present in police officers, so disassociation is emotionally numbing, physical numbing, or as active compartmentalisation, where emotions are disrupted, separated, or consciously detached. Now, disassociation is understood as emotional detachment or disengagement from traumatic memories, and it's considered as a coping mechanism or a strategy in policing which police officers do and can use, where individuals might break away from their awareness, they might break away from their memories or thoughts in response to stress and trauma. So manifestations include depersonalisation, which is where individuals will feel detached from the self, including emotions and bodily experience. Now, it is understood that this can happen as a natural mechanism in results and in response of trauma. But what some research carried out by Lenny in 2019 found is that some officers will evoke depersonalisation in the job because they see that as a protective mechanism. There's also derealisation, which it involves a sense of detachment from the external world and is often experienced alongside depersonalisation as part of the dissociative response to trauma. Then we have hypoemotionality, and this is characterised by diminished emotional experience. So in other words, I know I have feelings, but I can't feel my feelings. And then we have hyporeactivity, which can manifest as feeling or appearing robotic. And this is frequently described by police officers as both an organisational expectation and a consequence of emotional labour. And this came about within previous police research. Officers have also admitted that despite finding aspects of the work distressing, they felt that if emotion was expressed, they would be viewed as not coping, or they would be viewed as having a weak character. We also know from recent research some of the other psychological impact of policing. So there are operational stressors which exist. So the kinds of activity that police have to attend to, the kind of serious circumstances that police officers are exposed to, things like suicide, assault, child abuse, can heavily impact on their emotion. And what they also find is that public scrutiny, because of the use of smartphones and social media, really impacts police well-being as well and undermines confidence. There's also emotional labour. So one particular study, again carried out by Lenny, looked at individuals within specialist units in police and found that many of the professionals working in that area said that they wanted to remain emotionally neutral because they felt that that would help in the situation, make them appear more professional. But also, there's this expression of reinforced stigma around expressing emotion in policing as well. Studies have shown emotional exhaustion, emotional numbing, detachment and isolation, all of which will increase over time with policing staff. And in terms of mental health outcomes, as I mentioned before, 1 in 5 police officers will develop PTSD, and officers report high rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Many will experience identity loss and psychological decline over time, with mental health deteriorating significantly from recruitment through active service into retirement as well. What a lot of police officers have also acknowledged is that they find their identity is lost because they give so much to the role. So that becomes a really strong part of their identity. And since going live in July 2025, the Oscar Kilo Mental Health Crisis Line, which is available to everyone in policing experiencing a mental health crisis, including suicidal thoughts, received more than 200 calls in the first 6 months, which is quite a high number there. And we know that this is a real prevalent issue in policing, and that's why we wanted to carry out this research. So we were specifically interested in indirect trauma experiences in the research, although what we would say as a research team is that certainly police officers and staff did talk about direct trauma that they had experienced from the role as well. So I'm just going to give an overview of both, really. So direct trauma is considered to be an event or circumstance that happens directly to an individual or is witnessed by an individual. And SAMHSA say that trauma is an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Indirect trauma is a little bit different. So indirect trauma can occur through accessing trauma narratives, whether that's listening to stories, reading case files, or watching traumatic footage. Indirect trauma is defined as trauma experienced indirectly, either through an impact on family members, close friends, or therapy clients, or through repeated exposure during professional duties, such as those undertaken by emergency rescue services. And that, of course, includes policing. So what do we know about indirect trauma in trauma research? Well, what we know is that indirect trauma research has largely focused on family members and certain practitioners. So it's really well documented in families of veterans, prisoners of war, and Holocaust survivors. It's also well documented in families of individuals with life-threatening illness. There are evidence across frontline professions. So what I should say there is a lot of research focuses on therapy roles and roles in counselling services. That was acknowledged quite early on by Figley. But there has been work since then looking at indirect trauma impact on police, disaster workers, firefighters, nurses, social workers and childcare workers, crisis line workers, mental health professionals and probation workers. And what was really interesting about these pieces of research is that initially indirect trauma was thought to impact individuals in the traditional caring roles, but what we can see is it's emerging into roles that are just interacting with everyday human beings and connecting with human beings. So I like to share this quote by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, who I think really does capture the impact of indirect trauma. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And that really does capture the experiences of indirect trauma on individuals. And that's what we were very interested in this piece of research in particular. So this is the area that we wanted to explore with police officers and staff, and to have a look at different interventions that could be used to buffer against the effects of indirect trauma. So our study involved recruiting police officers and staff to attend one-to-one interviews to discuss experiences of indirect trauma and also experiences of wellbeing support that might already exist in policing, and if there was any access to that, what that access looked like. Then those involved in the research went on to complete what we call the support model training, and I will tell you a little bit more about the support model as we go through the lecture this evening. But within the support model training, importantly, there was a section on indirect trauma, relational trauma and how it can manifest in our relational styles, plus an interactive chance to trial the support model during the training, which was really, really well received. Just to also point out that the support model is an amalgamation of trauma-informed principles, counselling skills and reflective practice. So it was an in-house developed model developed by Nick Huth, and he is a very skilled social worker and also has lots of experience in supervision and reflective practice. So his model was used, and we wanted to explore how that would work. And then after a period of 12 weeks, we invited participants back for a second round of interviews where we asked them their experiences of using the support model. We asked about experiences of the training that they received, and that was really to kind of gather that feedback. Now, we applied a trauma-informed approach throughout our research methods. So those of you that had attended the session just before this one on the trauma-informed research guidance, this piece of research was really pivotal, actually, in creating that guidance, because we were developing that guidance as we carried out the research, so we were learning as we were doing. And since then, similar pieces of research that we're doing, we're able to apply that approach straight away. So, for example, at the beginning of our research, rather than traditionally using information sheets only to tell people about the research, we held workshops, and we invited individuals into the workshops to collaborate with us and co-produce and find out a little bit more about what it was like already and what areas might need exploring. We also wanted to keep in touch with our participants throughout the whole research process. So once we had carried out analysis as a team, we held an analysis feedback session where participants could come along, and we told them about our findings, the key themes, and it gave participants an opportunity to then feed in and say to us whether they felt that we had captured their voice accurately, whether there was any experiences that we might have missed. And that was a really valuable session. And we were so grateful, actually, because our participants really did engage with us all throughout the whole process. And our plans now is that any outputs that we do produce, so reports and articles, we will, as good practice, send to all participants before they are published so that they can make sure that they're happy with what's being shared. Okay, so I just want to play a little game with you for now. I want you to think, what comes into your mind when I say rock? So some of you might be thinking this. Maybe you're thinking this. Or maybe some of you are thinking this. What comes to your mind when I say work? Might be thinking this. Maybe this. Or maybe it's more this. What comes to your mind when I say indirect trauma? For most people, it's this. And as I said, this is where the majority of research around indirect trauma, particularly vicarious trauma, sits in kind of therapy and counselling roles. You might be thinking this. So professions who engage really closely with individuals and families and support them every single day. But actually, what about this? And this is where we centred our research. So I just wanted to give an overview of some of the manifestations of indirect trauma. Although our research didn't set out to suggest that anybody was experiencing these manifestations, I think it's really important to point out the differences in these manifestations. And we did this with participants as well. So secondary traumatic stress and compassion fatigue, there's a bit of a kind of concept war going on in the literature around these two terms. So some will say that compassion fatigue is a new way of saying secondary traumatic stress. But they are, if an individual is suffering from compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress, what tends to happen is they tend to experience similar symptoms to PTSD, and they will have experience things like intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, and nightmares. Compassion fatigue can also reduce levels of empathy and may be temporary. And what it can often evolve from is just a one-off contact with somebody who shares their story. So there doesn't need to be that relational component for an individual to experience compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress. It can occur from a one-off exposure to maybe reading a difficult case file or speaking to an individual that has experienced trauma. So I like to use the backpack analogy, and apologies because I do like to use a lot of metaphors in my work, but I liken compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress to helping another person unpack their backpack so that you can help them make sense of things and organise things as they're telling their story. And as they're putting all of their baggage back into their backpack, some of it ends up in your backpack, and you leave the room with that, increasing its weight. Vicarious trauma is a little bit different. So again, some literature will talk about them in the same light, but there is a difference here. So vicarious trauma leads to negative shifts in how a person sees themselves, how they see other people, and how they see the world around them. It erodes sense of safety, trust, and meaning, and individuals will often have thoughts like, I can't help, the world isn't safe. The real difference here is the shift in worldview. So everything that you think you know about the world or you feel you know about the world dramatically changes when you experience vicarious trauma, and those things no longer feel safe, those things no longer feel good. Vicarious trauma stems from constructivist self-development theory, and that is that we build our understanding of the world from our experiences, and exposure to trauma will shape or reshape that understanding. So again, with the backpack analogy, if you imagine your inner world view is your backpack, vicarious trauma is when repeated exposure to others' trauma adds to your backpack and it starts to break and it starts to split. The other thing to mention about vicarious trauma is it typically takes longer to develop, and that is because it often involves a relational element where an individual has met the person a number of times, developed a empathic relationship, and therefore they're more at risk of experiencing vicarious trauma. And then we have burnout, and burnout doesn't necessarily occur due to indirect trauma. It can be experienced in a range of work settings, typically occurring gradually. It's more prevalent in helping fields, in helping professions, but it can occur anywhere. And burnout can be related to lack of recognition at work, value conflict of the self and the organisation, so potentially where the organisation has a set of values and the person feels that they don't really align to those values, or maybe the workplace is not as committed to those values, or insufficient opportunity to input into organisational decision making. Those who experience burnout might also struggle with cynicism, emotional exhaustion, and detachment from work. So burnout is like walking an endless trail with a heavy or broken backpack, which you are unable to set down. Okay, so you have some cards in front of you, some red and green cards. And what I want you to do is answer the question on screen. So just think about it. Do you take time to reflect on your emotions in your professional practice? So if you do, you can lift the green card up. If you don't, you can lift the red card up. And there will be no judgment from the front of the room. Okay, so I can tell you that there is quite a fair mix in here, which is nice to see. So there is some people that are taking time to reflect on professional practice and emotion, but we often see that actually this isn't the case really. People really do struggle to reflect emotionally on the impact of their roles, and quite often it's because we feel so busy all the time, and we feel that we're constantly going. It's very, very difficult to sit and take a few moments, isn't it, and just think, actually, how am I really feeling? How has that conversation impacted me? How has that day impacted me? How has that moment of connection with that individual impacted me? But this is where there's real power, and this is what we've certainly found in our research. So what is reflective supervision? Reflective practice is already used in certain areas. So part of how we came to develop this piece of research was Nick's knowledge in social work, and the fact that he knows how reflection is used in social work and amongst social workers. So it can build self-awareness of stress. When we're able to reflect, we're then able to think, actually, I am feeling quite stressed now, I am feeling under pressure. It encourages objectivity, accountability and growth, because often when we have that conversation of reflection, that other person sitting opposite us is almost like a mirror. And just hearing them even say similar or the same things that we are saying about ourselves can really help us to hone in on how we're feeling. And it's argued that it should be part of everyday working life. So supervision will enable reflection in various different ways. There are managerial kinds of supervision where individuals will experience guidance from line managers. There's clinical supervision, which can explore professional relationships. And there's peer-led supervision, which can lead to creative problem solving and shared learning. And it was the peer-led supervision that we were particularly interested in. Supervision has 3 core functions, according to the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. So it has normative function, and that leads to accountability, or can lead to accountability. Formative function, which can lead to learning, and restorative function, which can help well-being. And again, that's where we wanted to focus our attention. So what this tells us is that without structured support, our risk of burnout increases. Without having that space for reflection and reflective practice, the risk of burnout does increase. And supervision can be seen as an investment in well-being and also professionalism, because it challenges us to think things through in different ways. So I want to introduce the support model to you. And as I said, this is Nick's model. So I hope you're sitting there very proud, Nick. And you can see this model is an amalgamation of the trauma-informed principles, of counselling skills and reflective supervision. It is an acronym, and the acronym stands for safety, understanding and empathy, positive affirmations to provide practical feedback, open communication, respect boundaries, and a team approach. And what sets this model aside from other models of reflective practice and reflective cycles is that we were not interested in processes. We weren't interested in what went wrong, what can you do better next time, what's the learning from this. We were interested in emotion. So how did that make you feel? Why do you think it made you feel that way? How do you feel going about the rest of your day now? Do you need support? Do you need somebody to talk to? Do you need additional help in any way? And that's what we really tried to convey in the training and throughout the support model. So you can see that it's broken down to outline what each of these areas mean, but it's also broken down to the skills required. And what you might notice there is that these skills are skills that police officers and staff do and will have. So it wasn't for us about teaching new skills, it was about harnessing the skills that we have as human beings. Things like listening skills, and it's really interesting because we can quickly develop bad habits in listening, can't we? We can listen to respond, or we can listen but still have our phone in our hand. And actually we were sort of thinking and challenging each other really on, okay, well, what's really listening? what about when we just listen to listen, and what impact can that make on another human being? And it comes back to what I said at the very beginning. The greatest gift anyone can give us is their time and energy, and to be able to hold them and hear them is a really, really special thing. So some of the key findings then. Now, this first bit is findings that that came out during the first interview, so before the support model training and before the pilot period. So we found in our study that indirect trauma is a risk in policing. I mean, obviously the research already shows that, but this was a recurring theme in our interviews, was the prevalence of bearing witness to other people's direct trauma and the weight of carrying that within the role. Participants recognised that cases were very complex, and it did affect their mental stamina, and they left feeling depleted of energy. So you can see some of the data extracts on screen now. We deal with the trauma of the suspect and the welfare of the suspect. I was just mentally exhausted, and I find it really deflating. It takes a lot out of you. We also found that emotional suppression is cultural, so many participants discussed how hiding emotion was commonplace, either for themselves or for colleagues, to demonstrate emotional stability. And this was for various reasons, participants explained. So they spoke about cultural hangovers, how sometimes in training there was an idea of, no, actually you keep a stiff upper lip, and you don't display emotion. Detraction from a person-centred approach. So some of the participants were saying, I really care about the person in front of me, and I don't want to show emotion because I don't want them to feel that I'm making it about me. I want them to know that they are the most important person in the room. And fear of being considered an individual with a weak disposition. And as you can see from this quote here, I would kind of feel that it was an admission of weakness. And the other thing that we noticed, the other finding that we noticed, is there's a variation in wellbeing provision. So all participants alluded to a number of support mechanisms already in place in North Wales Police, and they spoke about overall wellness provisions and wellbeing. So they spoke about critical incident debriefs, counselling, and police treatment centres. Individuals that accessed counselling found it really beneficial, and they were very positive about the counselling service. But there was a reluctance with some individuals to access the counselling service for, again, a number of reasons. There was fear of what a referral might look like on the outside to other people, but there was also a fear of, well, what happens after the counselling finishes? Does it just stop at a certain point, and then what? And then we also spoke about Oscar Kilo provisions, which is the mental health provisions, and some of the participants weren't aware of Oscar Kilo, so they didn't have the knowledge of Oscar Kilo. Some did point out that there are posters dotted around the stations and things, but they weren't able to fully understand what Oscar Kilo is and what it was. And we firmly feel that the support model can complement Oscar Kilo and work alongside it, not instead of, but actually together. I think that they could be a really good match. So this is another quote, a really powerful quote from one of our participants prior to the support model training. And this was, they were talking about their own experience here of indirect trauma. So if you think of the most traumatic thing you've ever experienced, the hairs on the back of your neck will go, your heart rate will quicken, and your palms will sweat. Trauma doesn't get filed into a memory. Trauma kind of sits in the present. So a smell or a sound or things can trigger you, and then you're re-experiencing it. Things would trigger me, so I'd be watching TV, and the next thing there'd be a scene of an autopsy or a morgue or police shows. I would suddenly be hyperventilating. And this was a really important finding for us, because what we found from that is that people carry that trauma home with them, and that can affect their family life. And that's what we see with indirect trauma, is it's quite insidious, and it will creep into personal life. It doesn't just affect us professionally, but it affects us personally, and it affects our closest relationships. And certainly we had conversations and stories from participants that shared some of those impacts that they had felt. So we're going to look at post-support now. And I'm pleased to say that we had some we've got some really lovely data extracts from this. So key findings here was having a safe space and enhanced psychological safety. So many of the experiences of using the support model were positive for participants. It was suggested that the model allows for very focused, meaningful discussion where they felt that they could actually be very honest with each other. And because it's not prescriptive, it's informal, it was really appreciated because participants were saying how that helped to create psychological safety. So this was a quote from one of our participants. "I know assuredly there will be a space for me to say what I want to say and have that safe space for me to talk it through with someone. So it was a real source of comfort." And those are the quotes that have meant so much to us because it has demonstrated the power of human connection and the power of being able to talk to somebody, the power of relationships, which can't ever be underestimated. Another key finding was relational care and openness. So the model helped participants build relationships with other officers and staff who they might not ordinarily come into contact with because they might be on a different shift pattern or they might work in a different setting in the police service. And they found that it really helped to encourage conversations quite quickly and openness quite quickly. So here we have a participant who said, "It's actually really interesting how quickly you do end up discussing things that are quite sensitive and traumatic." And again, that was really interesting for us because we might feel uncomfortable at first in conversations, particularly if it's an individual we've not met much before or we haven't had those sorts of conversations with. But what we found is that actually that didn't matter and it was found to be really beneficial and useful. And hope for the future. So individuals found the model supports discussions that can have a meaningful impact on well-being. And the viewpoint was that forces should consider evidence-based approaches to welfare and become really proactive in supporting staff and officers. Although they did acknowledge that there is already a lot of well-being provision available to them, but this offered an alternative for those who didn't want to go down a formal route and offered a more informal, psychologically safe environment for them. So here we have, I hope it's rolled out. It would be interesting to see policing change to be more scientific about welfare. And another key quote here about the support model. "I think it opens locked doors. It gives you that opportunity just to have that conversation with somebody that maybe you wouldn't have had previously. Because sometimes you feel a bit closed when you've somebody who actually works in the force that you can explain jobs you've been to. It opens up doors and it's just about communication. Some days, if you're not quite feeling right, just have that conversation." And I think that is so, so powerful from starting off in positions of feeling maybe in some cases quite isolated or nervous about sharing emotion because of how it was to be perceived, to then, come round to these data extracts here that are really hopeful about communication, really hopeful about emotion, and not being afraid to talk to people, not being afraid to have that open and honest conversation about how you're feeling and the difference that can make. So we also asked our participants, what would you change about the support model and what would you change about the training of the support model as well? And the following suggestions come directly from participants. So they suggested expanding access across service. And what they meant by that is that our study was a small pilot study and it involved staff and officers from different areas. But what they were suggesting was that it would work even better if it was rolled out to across the service and across teams, because sometimes that reflective practice might feel more comfortable within certain teams, and sometimes people might feel more comfortable seeking reflective supervision outside of the immediate team. So if it was rolled out, there was options there for individuals, which again aligns to a trauma-informed approach about offering individuals option and choice. Allocate protected time. So this came up importantly, that actually protected time should be given in the police service to allow for reflective supervision. It shouldn't be on top of what they already do, because we know that they're already pressured and that there is already a lot of high demand on them. But actually there should be allocated time within the work week to allow them to engage in this activity. To add a decompression period after the peer-to-peer reflective supervision meeting. So this was a really good suggestion from one of the participants who said, actually, even just having 10 minutes afterwards just to sit and have some time and reflect on the reflection would be really, really beneficial and helpful. To consider both team-based, cross-team pairings to maximise comfort and confidentiality, which I've already touched on, and to ensure that the training is clear in relation to the topic guides that we provide. So during the training, we provided topic guides to help steer conversation for those who might feel a little bit uncomfortable at first and not know what to say. But what we found is that we don't want it to be prescriptive either. So to change the training in order to make it very, very clear to participants that you do not have to use topic guides if you don't want to. They're there to help, but you don't have to use them. So as a team, what we would like to do next is to see how and if the support model works in other services. We are currently working with Clwyd Allen Housing Association, and we're about to enter into the second stage interviews with Clwyd Allen. So we've done the pilot, and we will be collecting data during February and March from those participants to see how it works in a housing association. But what we can say early on is that it has had a really positive effect there as well, and they're continuing to wanting to continue to use it after the research has been carried out. And in fact, what we have done is learnt from this and utilised our trauma-informed research guidance to inform our study with an advisory board, and the advisory board have fed into the journey, and they were the ones that suggested, please don't say it's going to be the last reflective supervision sessions, because we really want people to feel that they can carry on, and that was really lovely to hear. So in summary, what we have found is that our research demonstrates that there is an emotional toll and emotional demands in policing, and it could benefit from reflective peer-to-peer supervision support. And this research highlighted the benefit of introducing such a model into policing, one that focuses on emotion rather than processes, one that creates connection between colleagues and allows space and time for honest and potentially sensitive conversations to take place. And also in summary, we feel quite strongly that implementing support more widely could help North Wales Police take a proactive approach to wellbeing, supporting officers and staff, and embedding reflection as a core element of professional practice. And that's alongside all of the amazing things that are already going on to support wellbeing. And as I said, we wouldn't want this to overtake any of the other provision, but actually be offered as an alternative that could be easily accessible for individuals, where it is just about having a conversation, it is just about connecting and feeling safe and feeling heard in the moment. So lastly then, what the evidence tells us: indirect trauma is routinely absorbed and experienced. Cultural expectations of emotional control can deepen disconnection and distress. And suppressing our emotion can lead to long-term harm. And we know, again, given the research that exists out there, that police officers, if they go into retirement, there's often not a long period of time of their life that they have after retirement because of the chronic stress that they are exposed to in their roles. But there is opportunity for change, and the opportunity is that human connection can be protective. Being heard, validated and supported reduces isolation, it reduces stigma, and it can help with help-seeking behaviours. Safe spaces for reflection can strengthen well-being without weakening professionalism. And I think that was another key element, really, is that we found that our participants were so professional, and that's why they wanted to maintain their emotions in interactions with the public. But actually, this model won't detract from that professionalism, and this model can help them and help to ensure that they feel that they are doing justice to the profession. So as a take-home message for you, I would say prioritise human connection as a protective resource. It really does make a huge difference to people's lives. And remember to put down the glass of water when you need to, and it's okay to do that. Okay, thank you very much for listening.